Good morning, everybody. Welcome. My name is Dran Lennox, senior football player at Bethel College in Kansas within the KCAC, and I'm proud to be the chair of the NAIA's Association of Student Athletes. Over the last few years, there's been a growing awareness for student athletes' mental and physical health. Many member schools had to make the difficult decisions to stop playing sports, reduce fan attendance, go into virtual learning, and many more life-changing situations that has directly affected student athletes. It is not just the student athletes that have been affected, though. Countless athletic trainers, coaches, athletic directors, and even the NAIA administration itself has been challenged every step of the way to continue to make the NAIA student-athlete experience the best possible. It is through this valiant effort as a whole that the NAIA has endured and grows stronger than ever, united around the health and well-being of the thousands of athletes in its care. Institutions, their employees, and their student athletes has risen above, connected, and strive to be resilient in action.
Hello everyone, my name is Maddie Hearn. I'm a third-year softball player at Columbia College of South Carolina in the Appalachian Athletic Conference, and I'm also a representative of the NAIA National Association of Student Athletes. I'm so thankful to be able to stand before you all and advocate for the mental health of all of my peers and fellow student athletes in the NAIA. Many people face battles that cannot be seen by others. And while these battles cannot be seen, it does not mean that they should have to face it alone. It's essential that we help in creating environments on our campuses that allow student athletes to know that it's okay to ask for help and it's okay to not be okay. Sadly, this past year on my campus, we lost one of our own student athletes due to her own battle. I would like to dedicate the session to Akaya McMillan, a first-year track and field athlete who is truly a star on our campus, whose life brought so much light to everyone that she touched. She will forever be missed. Following this tragedy, my campus made changes to better the lives of our students. The first was providing an office in our gym with a licensed practitioner named High Love Johnson to have office hours and be available to all of our student athletes throughout the week. The second was our Campus Association of Student Athletes advocated and has planned multiple mental health days in the coming year to provide respite for all of our student athletes. And looking forward, our athletic director, Debbie Wardlaw, will be ensuring that our faculty and staff receive more professional development on the topic of mental health. I would like to share with you a quote from Dr. Candace Williams, a licensed practitioner of counseling. She states, "We have to put the person before the student and the athlete, otherwise we are at risk of losing all three." We hope this panel encourages each of you to continue this important conversation on your campus and find your path forward. In support of this awareness, you may have seen a few of us wearing stickers or ribbons designed by Betsy Cutler, who you know from Saturday's mental health workshop that draw attention to athlete mental health.
This awareness is of primary importance to us student athletes. We hope you will join us and take a ribbon or sticker offered by our ASA members as you depart the session. But for now, it is our honor to introduce the president of the NAIA and a true advocate for student athletes, Jim Carr.
So thank you all. So speaking of Dranon and Maddie and the ASA peers, I think you could certainly argue that this is one of the most impactful years for the ASA, whether it's the national group or the ASA at the conference level or at the community level. They're speaking up and they're engaging decision makers and they're talking with people on campus about various challenges and issues. These young adults have stepped up and really shared their feelings and shared with us, again, some of the challenges of being a student athlete. And I think most importantly, are sharing their needs. And so it's up to us to listen to them and make sure that we're following along and doing what we can to assist. We also know that we're going through a lot of change, all of us together, and I think most of us are really eager to get back to some sense of normal. But I think the challenge is we can't just go back to what normal looked like in 2019. It's going to be a new normal, and we all have to figure that out together, and especially in the area of health and safety for our student athletes. But the good news is we have a great panel here today that I'm going to moderate. They're experts from campus, but also from the healthcare industry, and so they're the experts, so no need to hear any more from me. I'm going to just jump into the panel and start asking them some questions. Our first panel member and the person who'll get the first question, and by the way, they've graciously offered their contact information on the screen. So not only email, but cell phone numbers. So if you have a question after the session or down the road, they've all said it'd be fine to connect directly with them if they can assist. So first I want to start with Dr. Jim Borchers. Many of you know Jim's name. If you don't know him personally, he's been the chair of our medical advisory panel that helped us get through COVID, and is also the founder of USCAH, who's a great partner of the NAIA, and we're hoping that now that COVID has at least receded, that we can get back to some of the original things that we talked about in terms of health and safety for our student athletes. So I wanted to start with Jim and just talk a little bit about standard of care, essentially, and sort of what does that look like now, and then kind of what do you see coming in terms of the responsibilities of all of our schools to meet the needs of their student athletes?
Well, thanks, Jim. Appreciate you having me here this morning, and certainly a topic that very important, and I think the number one priority facing all of athletics, but certainly college athletics today is student athlete health and wellness, and certainly physical health and mental health that I know we're going to talk about. You talk about standard of care, and I think we know that beginning in about 2019, there were a number of best practices that were endorsed by many major medical organizations for athletic organizations and institutions that were going to have athletics, and certainly COVID slowed some of those down. But the responsibilities that come with that in the ability to educate and certify both medical and non-medical staff that are going to interact with student athletes, and as the two student athletes were speaking about, creating a culture around student athlete health and safety is going to be of the utmost importance. We've been really fortunate to work with a number of organizations, but also to be working with folks at the federal level, at Congress, to talk about what's important from athlete health and safety. And certainly the ability to deliver those programs that are going to make certain that certain issues and topics are always addressed on an ongoing basis to make certain that a culture exists around health and safety is going to be there in the future. I think to ignore that increases risk and liability significantly. And there was a great example even this morning, national news, ESPN, University of Oregon, where institutions, conferences, and even associations are going to have to think about how they reimagine what health and safety means for athletes. The good thing about all this is it's not a huge, people think about this in a financial investment. It's not a huge financial investment. It's basically an investment in your priorities and what your priorities are going to be. And so we're really encouraged that there's going to be opportunity to reimagine this and think a little differently than we have in the past. We know that healthcare personnel are challenged. We know that our healthcare personnel on campuses have been challenged. They've suffered burnout like a lot of other healthcare personnel. And so we have to think about how we can assist them. We have to think about what types of programming helps to assist them. But we also have to think about who is the person that we're thinking about. And I think we have to refocus on that's the student. That's who we're talking about. And if we keep the student at our center, if we think about what we're doing with the programming we're talking about, if we think about what it means to have coaches and others go through professional development, for example, we make that experience better. And that's what we're all after.
Right. Well, yeah, it's very helpful. And, at least personally, I've always thought about, we're just trying to figure out what's the right thing to do for our student athletes and listen to them and meet their needs. But there's also outside influences that set standards for us and create responsibility, and maybe the reform lawyer in me thinks about that from a liability perspective. But any words of wisdom for our schools to try to get their arms around that and try to really, you probably can never know for sure whether you're meeting all the responsibilities and the standards, but any words of wisdom on how to come at that?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is to recognize that you need to start. And I think, so starting means accepting it and then engaging it. And so what we find is that oftentimes just getting that first start, working through a self-study, working through an assessment, seeing where things are, acknowledging what your challenges are and what your resources are, acknowledging how you can best move forward. It's like any other problem or any other situation, you have to start at the beginning. You can't just say, oh, we're just going to do this and that takes care of it and then we won't think about it anymore. And I'd say that's the other thing that I would just encourage people to think about, is that this is an ongoing process. It's something that you have to continue to stay engaged in. And it's not just solved by personnel. I think people think, oh, if I have somebody on my campus who is the person that's supposed to deal with this, then I can go on and think about something differently. That's not the case today, and we need to think about it in a way that's going to continue to allow for evolution of what student-athlete health, safety, and wellness is going to mean.
Right. Well, thanks for that. And Jim's too humble, and I know we've talked about not making this a commercial for USCH, but if you're looking to get started, they're a great organization to reach out to and help get started. So Reggie, just want to turn to the campus level a little bit, and Dr. Reggie Swanyika is the president of Ottawa University, known as Dr. Reg, I think, around campus, so I'll go with that. Can you talk a little bit about, so you hear Jim talking about these kinds of things from a president's perspective at the campus level, I guess really kind of two things. How do you think about meeting those responsibilities, but also what are the kind of changing expectations of students on campus in this area?
Yeah, I think one of the first things we have to realize is the thinking that has gotten us to this point is not the thing that is not going to cut it going into the future. The future of higher ed is not going to look anything like its past in any way. So some of our practices, some of our thinking, some of our assumptions, we certainly learned that through the pandemic that we kind of need to walk away from some of those. First thing I want to say is some of our best teachers, as far as higher ed leadership philosophy, are the current students we have. And I tell leaders all the time that, why wait to read from a book 10 years from now based on research from these current students? Why not just shortcut it and just learn from some of these students? So we've done surveys to find out whether the standard of care and the care that we're providing is adequate. But Jim, the first thing is how all this plays out is it requires presidential attention. So for me, that became a very big thing on my campus, that I needed to be personally involved and engage my board and introduce a few metrics. And as I make my reports to the board, and I held myself accountable to see how we're doing with issues concerning wellness and health. And I like the fact that we are transitioning from singling out mental health or mental wellness to just overall health and wellness as part of kind of what we call on our campus the whole person's education, where we are caring about the whole person. But Jim, we have a unique situation. We have 32 sports on our campus, and the majority of our students are athletes, and we're still trying to figure out more sports. And we're unashamedly pursuing that. So any policy we have is not just for athletes, it's for the entire university, so that our athletes don't feel singled out, and so that it goes into the overall psyche of the university. It goes into the discussion, it goes into our practice. We embed it, our faculty are trained. So I'll be happy to share with you some of the things that we've done over the last 2 years, and I'll speak to the issue about resources. Certainly, I am the driver. I am the person that is responsible for finding the resources to make things happen and respond to the needs of the students. And our students now are more upfront about these issues than maybe when I went to school, where you would hide it and where you wondered what everybody else is thinking. Nowadays, these students will tell you upfront that I have this issue or I would like to speak to an expert. We experienced all the shortages. We're based in rural Kansas. We have one hospital system in town, which is very close to where we are, does not have mental health experts, so we have to rely on Shawnee. We have to come to Olathe. We have one psychiatrist who serves 3 counties. So you can imagine the challenges that we were facing, and trying to attract a mental health expert to come and take a full-time position with us. They can get paid more elsewhere. So we had to be creative about what we did. So now we are able, I'm happy to report, we offer 24/7 wellness services to all our students regardless of what state you come from, whether you're on vacation, whether you've gone home on spring break, you'll be able to be seen or you'll be able to speak to a mental health expert in your own state as a result of what we've done. But the president needs to pay attention to it. And without that, things fall through the cracks. And then it just becomes one of the programs that the university is trying, or one of the offerings that the university has, as opposed to that approach pervading the entire institutional culture.
Yeah, well, just a quick follow-up on that. I've been hearing from our student athletes who are here about some of the challenges of just getting people on campus to recognize mental health in particular as a challenge. And I think coaches certainly look at the physical part because they want to get kids back into competition. But so on your campus, have you had any challenges with getting coaches and or other athletic personnel to really focus in on the mental health side of it?
Jim, I'm going to tribute to our athletic staff. We haven't, but faculty, right? Because coaches spend a lot more time with students than sometimes faculty do. Because when you're a faculty member, your student is sitting in a seat, and you're standing in the front, you're delivering your content. So it's more difficult for them to understand the need to now having a customized approach to every student, that not every student who's sitting in there, gone are the days when you can approach them with a standardized pedagogy and a standardized approach, standardized assumptions. You can't do that anymore. I think coaches are ahead of that curve because they have an opportunity to interact one-on-one with the student, and the student can call and talk. So the main thing we've encountered is how to teach our faculty to be more responsive to the student. So we introduced what we call Faculty Fridays. And so our mental wellness experts put out some information every Friday to all our faculty, just giving them pointers on how to identify and how to support, how to be sensitive, how to be proactive on issues concerning student wellness. And of course, everybody on our campus now, we have to do I don't know if most campuses do this, the mental health first aid training that is provided at the beginning and is continuing to be ongoing. So that's the one segment. As far as coaches, kudos to them. I think everybody's gone through what everybody has gone through, including presidents. Right. We had to start a support group for presidents in the KICA. And that was started by the president from Friends, where she realized that even as presidents, we needed mental health support. Right. So we started these after-hours Zoom events with your favorite beverage, where the question was asked, how's it going? And we would talk amongst ourselves. So we realized if we needed support, our coaches need support, our students even need it twice as much.
Yeah, well, great. Thank you. Thank you for that. And so shifting over to Christian from the athletic director's perspective. Christian has a great perspective for this panel. He's, as most of you know, the current athletic director at MSU Northern, but comes up through an athletic training background and served on lots of leadership groups here with the NAIA. So, Christian, I guess first of all, how have things changed today compared to maybe back when you were more active on the athletic training side of things?
Sure. Back when I was starting out as athletic trainer, we were in a position where a lot of states didn't even have licensure for athletic trainers. We were in the position where not very many NAIA schools had full-time athletic trainers. They were usually contracted out. And we were brought in, hey, tape their ankle, get them back on the field, it doesn't matter. And then about 10 years later, we hit the concussion stage where we're sitting in a room 10 years ago talking about concussions and how important they are. And then we get a pandemic, and now we're sitting here back again making full circle on mental wellness of our student athletes. So when I started out, it was the athletic trainer and the students sitting in the training room, and we were discussing what's going on, their life stories, how can we help. But we didn't have any counseling on campus at that time. We didn't have basically a student health. If we did, we had a nurse that came in twice a week, and then they would make recommendations. So if this happened on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, we might have had to wait till Friday before they could see a student health nurse and then get them the help that they needed. Today at MSU Northern, we do have a full-time counselor. We just have another one that's teaching in our counseling program that has saw the need that we have on our campus, that she's going to start seeing some of our student athletes. And and our coaches and our staff and our faculty as well. We've found out that it's more than just the student athletes, it's everybody on our campus after last year, especially when we were back in classes with social distancing, and if somebody was positive, sometimes the whole classes were canceled. Our women's basketball team, I was talking to our coach before we left, they had a total of their team of over 860 days of quarantine in the last year and a half. And that means staying in their residence hall, staying in their apartment, no classes, no practice, no nothing, except for their TV in their apartment and their roommate. So that made a big red flag on our campus on how what we needed to do and how we went about doing it.
That's great. Just as a little bit of a follow-up, so as you described more resources, improvements on campus in these areas, any words of wisdom for folks who maybe aren't as lucky to have a president like Reg East to be leading this from the top, so how to go about on campus trying to get some more resources? Yeah,
our whole thing 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago now, when we didn't have a full-time counselor, it was led by our student senate. Our student senate came to our administration and said, we need this. We have $42,000 that we want to put towards getting a full-time counselor on our campus. Can you help with benefits? We think we can get somebody for $42,000. They came and approached our administration, opened our eyes to the need of that from our general student population and our student senate. The last year and a half, our ASA has gotten behind that and really came to us and shown us the need for our student athletes. We've implemented we call it a CARES team. I talked to Charlie Gross at Carroll College. They have something very similar where we have our student nurse, our counselor, our athletic trainers, our dean of students, some of our advisors, people in our student success. They make a team, and if something happens, that they get the information. So I can send an email saying, hey, I have a concern. I just met with this young student athlete. I have a concern. Would you guys like to evaluate it? And then they take it from there. It's pretty much all confidential, all anonymous. Our student support service, they've gotten very well involved. That's where we used to house our counselor. We did move that department down into our sub, and we've seen a great increase in our student athletes that have gone there. Our Office of Diversity, they've come in, and a lot of times our minorities have a hard time coming and talking to me as an athletic director, maybe their coach, but they're getting help in the Office of Diversity, so they're part of that crew too. And so I think you got to get a little bit creative and see what resources you can provide. We're very rural too. We're 120 miles from Great Falls, which is probably the biggest hospital that's close to us. A lot of times we have to, take our kids to the emergency room by helicopter to Great Falls. We do have a hospital across the street. Again, as we talked about, there's not a lot of mental health, mental wellness resources at that hospital. So, we're driving 120 miles or we're flying by helicopter sometimes, depending on the situation. So they are a lifeline for us. Our counselors are a lifeline for us, and we do have a master's degree program in that, and that's really helped us out to use those resources as well.
Thanks for that, Christian. And I'm always encouraged when I hear about athletic administration partnering with students to try to go to the administration or to get things to improve on campus. So kudos to you all for doing that. I want to move over to Farah, our last but certainly not least of our panelists. Farah Galani is with one of our newest partners, Mantra Health, and we're so fortunate to have you all coming in to help deal with or to help us improve our efforts especially around mental health, but other areas of support for our student athletes. Recently, one of your colleagues, let me get his name right, Sean Collins, was on our speaker series and talked a lot about the expectations now of students and parents as they come into collegiate athletics setting. And can you talk a little bit about what those trends look like and kind of how you think people should best deal with those?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think, first of all, it's important to mention that we have made great strides in reducing stigma for mental health care. And in fact, we have students and families who are coming to campuses talking about well-being and expecting that the campus will respond to that. You know, we still have a lot of work to do. So stigma, by all means, has not been eliminated. We still have a lot of work to do. And I think, you know, one of the important things to remember is how do we ensure that we are providing a standard of care, right? And what does best practice look like when we're providing care? And I think the most important thing to think about is your care accessible? Because there is no point in providing high quality care if it's not accessible to students, right? And when we think about our student athletes, we think about the complexities of their schedule and their needs. They need care that fits into their life, and I think parents expect that too. You know, they can no longer make it work when they have to see a provider, whether it's a therapist or a nurse or a psychiatrist, when the doors close at 5 p.m. You know, their needs go well beyond 8 to 5. I think the other piece to think about is students need tailored support, right? So not all college students, and certainly not all student athletes, look the same or have the same needs. And so when we think about having diverse providers, not only diversity in maybe language and faith and ethnicity and race, but also in expertise, right? And being able to meet the needs of that student. I think those kinds of things are best practice, and it's also what families are expecting now.
Right, that's great. And as Christian was describing his situation, not being very close to a hospital, it made me think about Mantra Health and some of the things you all do. Can you talk a little bit about Mantra Health, but also just in general, kind of what resources are available to people who may not have those resources physically close by?
Yeah, you know, I think as I heard each of my colleagues here speak, it really just highlighted the point that, you know, your location of your campus determines right now whether you receive quality care, and that should never be a factor, right? And so I think being able to partner with organizations that are providing that, you know, that supplemental support is going to be key, so that you can fill in the gaps where your teams cannot, right? And so currently, you know, thinking about what does your mental health care look like on your campus, and what is that gap that we're not able to meet? Is it the number of counselors? Is it the fact that we don't have psychiatry? Is it extended hours, you know, weekends, nights? Is it specialties that we don't have? You know, when we think about that, that is the framework you should use when you think about working with an organization that might be able to provide those extra services. Don't let quality reduce, though, right? I mean, in a world where we are constantly seeing lots of different organizations providing mental health care, we have to be really good stewards of maintaining best practice and doing our research to make sure who we partner with is offering high quality care, right? What does that look like? Evidence-based care that's sound in research, that we know will have positive clinical outcomes, you know, and being able to you know, have care that embeds into your culture. I love what you said, Dr. Reggie, about recognizing that even presidents need care. I think we need to shift the culture on our campuses to talk about mental health more, from the coaches to the athletic directors to the faculty to all students to parents. So this collaboration care model is really what we should be striving for, and making sure that if we do partner with an extra organization who's going to provide those services, they should also embed with your campus. So that way students know that that care is seamless. It doesn't feel like you're going outside of your school to get care with somebody who doesn't understand, but it's someone who's a part of that campus culture, understands the needs of that specific campus, and also works hand in hand with your leadership at that campus.
Right, that's great. I'm going to ask Farah one, and I guess the whole panel, a follow-up question, but if we want to then open it up to the audience for questions, so be thinking about what those look like. I was thinking we had microphones out there, but we don't, so you'll just have to use your loud voice to express those questions. But you know, as I was sitting on some of the ASA meetings, there was a lot of talk about, you know, essentially we work on our craft, our sport, whatever that might be, and our physical well-being. We work on our diet, but we don't talk a lot about every day working on mental health or mental wellness. So maybe start with Farah, but then let others chime in about how we can try to make that transition so that it is something that, you know, all of us are talking about, not just diet and working out when we can, but that we're working on mental and emotional health.
So I don't know if everybody knows this, but that age of college, you know, where students are going to college, right? That young adult age is also, it coincides with the onset for mental health disorders. So that just shows us that we have a huge responsibility to be able to really impact students at that age where we know they're the most vulnerable. We have an opportunity to make really meaningful change, right? And so, you know, Dr. Borcher says this, he talks about like really focusing on mental well-being. And so absolutely, I think in addition to providing care, we need to get better about teaching coping skills, right? And really building resilience in our student athletes, but also their coaches, because who are they watching? Right? They're watching their coaches, and if their coaches are taking care of themselves, students are taking care of themselves, and it goes all the way up, right? Coaches are watching their leadership. And so having this kind of culture of focusing on taking care of yourself and your whole self, right? All the needs that make up a person, I think is important.
That's great, and thanks for working resilience, our theme for the convention, into your answer. Appreciate that. Jim, anything to add on that topic?
Yeah, no, I appreciate all those comments, and I think what we talk about a lot is in medicine, whether you think of that as mental, physical, well-being, wellness, we very much tend to focus on what we call a disease-based model, which means that we intervene or we take care of people when something's happening or when we notice that something is wrong. And we know very well from much of what we know about health and wellness and well-being that our best bang for the buck is in being proactive. It's not in being reactive or in responding only when we see a problem. And so when we talk about the risk that people from the age of 18 to 24 have, for example, with mental health, people say to me, oh, you know, 50 or 60% of college students, you know, have a mental health issue when they're, you know, going through college. And I said, no, that's wrong. It's 100%. Because they're all developing. They all need mental wellness. They all need mental well-being, just the way they do with physical well-being. And so unless we are proactive, unless we decide that we're going to take steps to address all of these issues and look at best practice and look at these things, we'll continue to find ourselves kind of behind the times, so to speak, and behind where we want to be with this. And the interesting thing is that's not what we hear from who should be at the center. That's not what we hear from the student. The student and that person that is that age wants that knowledge. They want to create self-advocacy. They don't want to have to pick up the phone every single time something's going on. They want to be a good resource for themselves, and they certainly want to be a good resource for their peers. And so creating that culture and creating that self-advocacy is so important for all of us when we think about our health and well-being, but it's really important for student athletes. And so I think thinking about it in that fashion changes the paradigm, changes the way we think about it, and helps us to reframe it in a different fashion than, oh, we only respond when there's something wrong.
Great, great. Before I turn to the audience, Dr. Reg, anything?
So two things real quick. I want to tie in diversity and the destigmatization of mental well-being. So most campuses, you talk about diversity, equity, and belonging, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you just think about it, right? So that whole, at the crux of diversity, equity, and inclusion is the normalization of a student's narrative. You know, and the sooner you do it, you know, the more the student feels included, the more the student feels like they belong. And the old paradigm about mental health was, you know, if we targeted certain behaviors as, oh, that's indicative of need for mental health, it's because the ones that are excluded, we normalized them earlier, right? And so now we're targeting. Now, when we broaden it up, You know, we're saying, listen, you're included and you belong, and regardless of what your need is or whether society identifies that as a need or not. So part of what we've done to what we've done to destigmatize everything, and I'll give you another example. And years ago at Ottawa University, based on the knowledge we had, we thought we're going to destigmatize this, and we don't want students who need being stereotyped or being seen. So we moved our counseling services to the basement of our science building. That's where our clinic is. We have a physician who comes. We have a dedicated. So we actually have a clinic on campus, and it's free, and students don't pay anything. And in there, our counseling clinic. So we thought it needs to be away from view, so that a kid can just sneak away and not be seen and not feel like, ooh, I'm being stigmatized. Well, that was the thinking back then, and we thought it worked. So about a year ago, we found out that students are more open about this. And in a bid to be accessible, we decided we were going to relocate our student world services into the main administration building. That's where my office is. So when you park in the Horseshoe parking lot, as you walk up there, that first door to the left is where our mental health wellness office is. Access increased by 300% within the first 3 months. We moved to 24/7 care because we found a partner that works with us. And again, it was a collaborative effort, and the presidents in the KCAC and KICA talking amongst themselves and making recommendations and doing the research and sharing the research, and we landed on this partner. And I will tell you this, since then, we have reduced the after-hours crisis care by almost down to 10% of what it used to be. So it's 10 times less than it used to be. And I will define what an after-hours crisis was. It's when a student, it's when things get to a point where a student needs either institutionalization or one of our professionals have to go and attend and be with that individual as they get additional care, either at the hospital or here or at Shawnee Medical. It has gone down by almost 6 times to 10 times ever since we did that. And now it's out in the open, and students walk freely, and they host all kinds of events, and they have a little lounge, and students just go there and sit and just talk, and you can have cookies, and you can meet with those counselors, and it's out in the open, and that's one thing we learned from the students. So it helps when you destigmatize it and you just make it part of what it is you do and who you are as a university that is seeking to make sure every student feels included.
That's great. Thank you for that. Christian, anything to add before we open it up for questions?
I guess I would just add, one of the things that I've saw over the last year was our coaches understanding the need for this, and the need for themselves once they started dealing with this with their student athletes, then they kind of looked in the mirror and said, well, this is just more than just our student athletes. This is me, this is our staff, it might be their assistant coaches. But I think that's really opened the eyes of our coaches to be aware of what's going on the court and off the court with their student athletes. We've kind of made the same things as I said earlier, to try to get this macho tag off their back where I don't need to go see a counselor. I think we're beyond that. I think our student athletes are beyond that right now. On our campus, really we are being led by our students, and that makes a big difference. When we got the push, we're listening to our students, and it's helped. I mean, we have 2 counselors now. We actually have one that's going to move an office into our athletic building because she sees the need to come over. And if it's from 6 to 8 o'clock at night, she's going to come over 6 to 8 o'clock tonight, sit in her office. If it's during lunch hour, she's going to come over and sit in her office during lunch hour. So I think just the awareness of on your campus of if somebody's struggling in class, if your faculty are involved, if your student success is involved, if your diversity is involved, your coaching staff's involved, and you as athletic administrators are involved as well. I think that makes a big difference, and I think we're all aware of that right now over this past year and a half.
All right, thank you. Yeah, Jim.
Just one other comment. These comments are great. I just want to, if you're thinking about all this from a health standpoint, I want you to reframe it and think about it from performance. We've known forever that the healthier you are physically, the better you perform. Works the exact same way with mental health. And coming back from injury or recovering from a trauma or what goes on. If you look at success from performance, it all feeds together. And the interesting thing is the people that know this best are the people that are actually doing the activity. The people that are challenged with this are people that are outside of that. So oftentimes it is coaches or administrators or other folks. But the students or student athletes know, and they'll tell you. So things like sleep, things like mindfulness, things like resiliency that were mentioned here. It's not just about health, it's about performance, and all these student athletes want to perform at their best. And so it makes a huge impact. And it's just like anything in medicine. Usually if you talk to a patient or talk to an individual, they'll tell you exactly what the issue is. And a lot of times they know a lot about what will help them fix it. We just have to help them do it.
Yeah, great point, great point. Well, this is a big topic, so I'm sure there are lots of questions out there. Does anybody have a question for the panel? Yeah.
So this actually comes right off of what you were just saying. You guys have talked about initiatives and identifying and engaging. And Dr. Borchers, you mentioned about promoting self-advocacy. What tips do you have about turning awareness and education initiatives into empowering the students to be self-advocates, not just on our campuses, but for the rest of their lives?
So maybe just to repeat the question real quick. So I think if I have it right, it was how do you take some of the ideas and initiatives and turn that into student athletes being able to empower themselves to be advocates?
So many years ago, we, and this was with my former institution, and a mutual friend of ours, Jim, introduced a course called the Psychology of Success. And our concern was, when we're recruiting a student, we pay a lot of attention to the student, and because we want the student to come. After the student has arrived on campus, yeah, we pay some attention, but your question was for the rest of their lives. But what happens to a student when they graduate? What happens to Jim after he graduates and he wakes up on Monday? The cheerleaders are not around anymore, and he has to pay his own bills because there's no scholarship, and maybe he has to go flip burgers at McDonald's just to make ends meet, and that anticlimactic experience. A lot of students, a lot of athletes have struggled with transition post-graduation, and so how do we arm them, how do we equip them so that they're able to manage even that transition and for the rest of their lives and embed that as a lifestyle? So the course was called the Psychology of Success. And it just covered the whole gamut, how to manage transition and lifetime wellness as a lifetime activity and just the whole being. And so that's one way we did it, and it was required of all athletes. There was even a section on how to win officials. How to get the calls to go your way, right? and we did, and we're teaching them about kindness, sportsmanship, and all. Teaching them the whole gamut and equipment. That's just one way that we did it. The other way is the destigmatization, right? And a lot of students like students. Students like to go where students are. And most of the times as administrators, we think, okay, we got all the answers. Sometimes the answers lie within students. When I walk into the cafeteria and there are different organizations, I've got tables and they're tabling and they're having mental health week and they're doing this and they're offering yoga, they're offering this activity, and there's an expert on mindfulness who's going to be on campus invited by the students and just teaching them. So some of the resources have come from their own colleagues, from their own students, and the more and more they become comfortable with their idea that I need to take care not just of my own body and my own physicality, but my mental well-being, I think that helps them long term.
I'll just add something to that. Student athletes know what they need. And we just need to ask them, and we need to allow them to use their voice. And so Friday, the NAIA held a student athlete roundtable, and we spent a couple hours with the students talking to them about their mental health. And I'll tell you, they had so much to say about what they need. And so if we can create opportunities like that on their individual campuses, so they don't have to wait until they come to the convention to be able to speak, but creating those opportunities for them to be able to talk about their needs will allow them to practice that self-advocacy, right? Like, there's a place for me to talk, and my needs are being heard, and I'm being listened to, and I'm valued. That's gonna be a natural part of them building that skill.
That's great. What other questions are out there? Too early in the morning? Oh, there's one, Clay.
I guess my question's for you. How do we get the trainers to be more trained in helping with mental health? Because when we think about athletic injury, that student athlete is isolated. They're left at home, they don't travel, they're doing their rehab, they're not at practice, and so they feel that isolation, not part of the team. One of our students in senior research right now is looking at that. 90% of the students who've responded so far haven't had the mental health aspect of the rehabilitation. They get the physical rehabilitation, but there's no support mentally for them.
Yeah, so I think to summarize the question, it's about how do we better equip our trainers through either training or other resources to help with the mental wellness aspect of it, especially for those students who might be rehabbing or going through an injury and not really a central part of the team. So, Christian?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a tough question. I think that a lot of the stuff that happens in the athletic training room that comes out, when they're doing their physical treatment, there's a lot of mental treatment that's going on. If you guys haven't been in an athletic training room, if you want to know what's going on or what somebody did last weekend, go talk to your athletic trainer. They know everything and anything about what a student's doing. You know, where the party was, how many points they scored, how many assists that they had, what team is beating what team. The athletic trainers know it, and in a way, I think unknowingly, the athletic trainer provides some of that. They're not licensed to do that, but I think the more information, and I believe that is probably coming in their curriculums when they're coming up on how to recognize mental illness and provide some of that treatment to get them more mentally prepared. Because there's a process when you get injured. They go through a denial phase, and then they go through a depression phase, and then they have an acceptance phase. So a lot of that the athletic trainers do get when they're dealing with an ACL injury or a career-ending injury or a concussion. I think the concussion has put a lot more light on the mental part of athletics. So I think having some resources, for us having the resources of our counselors, they work hand in hand with our athletic trainers. So right now with the counselor that's coming over, they are working through our athletic trainers, and our athletic trainers are working through the counselor to make appointments and to set things up to get these student athletes the best care that we're able to provide on our campus right now. But I think we will see, just like we did with concussions, we'll see more awareness coming through the athletic training field, and more education being provided to our athletic trainers on campus, just like we did when concussions happened.
So far, I don't know if you have anything to add in terms of, I mean, I'm sure if a trainer's just listening to student athletes, there's some good that comes from that, but are there resources out there for athletics trainers that might not necessarily make them an expert, but at least give them some tools to use and guidance around maybe as much what to do or what not to do in that setting?
Yeah, I mean, I think working with, clinicians and those who are trained and being able to give you knowledge on how to identify signs of risk, right? And being able to give you the language to use to support students. I think Dr. Reggie might have mentioned mental health first aid. I don't know if everyone's familiar with that, but mental health first aid is a training that is provided on campus and it's meant for non-clinicians. So it's meant for, athletic directors or faculty. And it just teaches you how to first respond in a situation when a student is distressed, any level of distress. They don't have to be in crisis, they can be. What's the language you use when you respond to that? How do you approach that student? How do you encourage them to seek out care? And so these are things that, not everybody knows. And so I think making an effort to have that kind of education on campus can be helpful.
That's great. What other questions? Yes.
There's a lot of people that are offering to come to our campuses and speak to our teams. But if you do a little research into what their background is, they don't have a mental health background. Is there certain things we should be looking for when we have those people come speak to our teams or our coaches?
Yep. A great question. So lots of people out there are approaching you all to come to your campus, but so how do you parse through all those folks and make sure that you're getting people who are trained or who have the requisite requirements to help you on campus?
So I'll start here. I think you're brought up such a good point, and it just highlights that there are so many, I think, organizations and individuals who are interested in providing that education, but remembering standards of care and best practice is ensuring that the person coming in does have a clinical background. I do think that's important because they come from education and training where they understand mental health issues. But beyond that, I think expertise in collegiate mental health is key, right? Because mental health looks different for college students and especially for student athletes. So, inviting speakers who have that background and who can share with you that they have done presentations for other athletic organizations and do have that clinical background can be helpful. Also, reputable organizations like the Mental Health First Aid is, a nationally well-vetted organization that's been doing training for communities for many, many years. And so I think making sure that those kinds of things are in check will be helpful.
Yep, Ted?
Anecdotally, it seems that a lot of our young people today really struggle with failure. And at the heart of it all, it seems that one of the main things is coping skills. And I know the words coping skills came up earlier, something that I'm kind of passionate about. The intentionality of teaching kids how to cope with certain things and failure. And I think maybe a topic of kind of how to help us as athletic administrators learn how to better teach our young students how to better cope.
There's the questions around how do you help students with failure, and in particular coping mechanisms that can help with failure and other things that they might face. So Jim, you want to start?
Well, yeah, I think a lot of this to me comes back to starting the discussion and being proactive like it does with anything in health, like addressing it. Like somebody mentioned earlier about injury and what do we do with our athletic trainers to address mental, you talk about it from the beginning. When you tear your ACL, and the first part of that conversation is to address what this process is going to be like. And in fact, when you fully recover physically, you're going to have kinesiophobia. You're going to be afraid when you go back to be active. And I think in athletics, look, I played college athletics, like addressing right up front, you're going to fail and we're going to learn from it. It's going to happen. And we expect it to happen, and we're going to address it, and we're going to talk about it. We're talking about it even before it happens. But you need to talk about those things. You need to be comfortable talking about those things and not just being reactive to those things. And if we're just reactive, then we'll continue to deal with all of the same conversations that we continue to have. And so I think that it's difficult because oftentimes we just want to deal with what's in front of us, but it's dealing with what is the potential and equipping someone with skills to deal with that and using some experience, right? I'll never forget one time a coach said to me, pretty devastating loss or whatever, he said, I expected that this would probably happen at some point in your career. Because I've been there, I've seen it. And this is how we're going to deal with it. This is how we're going to recover with it. And that gives you a lot of confidence. Okay, I'm not the only person in the world that this has ever happened to, right? Same thing with health. I mean, you're not the only person in the world that has dealt with it. So if we have those proactive conversations, we're going to have a lot of skills, and we're going to equip people to be able to handle a lot of things on their own, rather than thinking about how do I just deal with it when it happens.
I just want to add to that. So, you know, our theme is resilience in action, and you mentioned resilience. Encouraging students to understand what resilience actually means. Resilience is born out of adversity, right? People build resilience when they face challenges. I think of an image of a willow tree, right? A willow tree like bends during a, big storm, but it doesn't break. That's resilience. So a lot of times people think resilience is born from just everyday skills, but no, resilience is born out of challenge. And so encouraging students that failure is actually giving them that trampoline to practice that resilience. If they were able to overcome that challenge, that's resilience, right? The next time they face that challenge, they're going to think back to that situation and say, well, what did I do the last time that I lost a game and I felt really defeated and I felt like I had let my team down and I felt awful. What did I do? I've gone through this before. I can go through this again. Right? So that's resilience. But in order to get there, right, we have to teach those proactive tools like taking care of, your overall health and wellness, right? Your eating habits, your sleep, mindfulness, right? To be able to manage that anxiety, those kinds of things. If we can take a proactive measure to do an education series for our student athletes, right? So that they can have those skills, and then when they face that challenge, because we know that they are going to, that's inevitable, then they can actually practice and put those tools into action, and then remind themselves that they can get through that.
And we offer that on our campus on Wednesdays. So some of you will know we went to a 4-day schedule, and on Wednesdays we don't have classes, and on Wednesdays that's our time for what we call Spirit Life and Professional Growth Days. And so as part of the Professional Growth Days, we do offer classes on resilience. We offer coping, how to cope, and there's a whole series on that. And Jim, I'll just make this one last comment because the issue about resources came up. I will tell you this, since 2020 up to now, everything we've done on mental wellness has not cost our institution a dime, not one penny. When we did the expansion we did, and we introduced graduate assistants, health and wellness graduate assistants during the pandemic, and we introduced another counselor that was paid for by a Spark grant from the state of Kansas. And then some of the HERF money that we got, we used it to enhance and got the software and got the partner that we got. And I'm telling you right now, as we sit here, we will be introducing Wellness Wednesdays, and that's going to be provided for by Blue Cross Blue Shield, who is our healthcare provider, and we just called them, and I told them I don't have a dime, but I need help, and they do provide the assistance, and they wanted to do it. Our broker, who we use as KCAC and KICA, who is IMA, I approached them, and I told them this is what I'm wanting to do. Can you all put your heads together and find out how I can pay for it? And find out what you can do, and they put their heads together. They put a team of 8 people, and they came back to me, and they'll be providing that going forward. It's not going to cost Ottawa University a dime.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. All right, we probably have time for one more question. Anybody else? Yeah. Thanks, DJ. Well, this has been a great panel, and I know I've learned a lot, and it's reaffirming my commitment from the national perspective to try to figure out how to get you all more resources to help with what is a real challenge out there, but also I think a real opportunity to help all our student athletes get stronger, get better, and just as I think Dr. Reg was saying, go on to be successful in life. So look forward to working with all of you on that. But before we leave, will you join me in giving the panel a round of applause? All right. Thanks again, you all, and hope everybody has a great rest of the day.